Good evening. I'd like to call the village board meeting for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, November 6, 2018 to order with roll call, please.
Kossler.
Here.
McAlpine. Here. Weinhammer.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
Betts.
Here.
Cavelli.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move to the open forum where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. I didn't have anybody sign in. Is there anybody here that would like to address the village board? Mr. Coffey?
Thank you, board members. My name is Scott Coffey from Cary. A couple, three things I wanted to bring up. First of all, thank you for, you had a consent agenda item tonight for the state schools program and allow some safety enhancements on West Main, and I think that'll be really conducive to adding to safety for those students that are crossing in that particular area, trying to give them priority. So thank you for the administration, I think, kind of driving the ship on that one. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your support too on that project.
It was a joint effort in that. Thank you.
Well, you guys are the experts. We're, you know, just along for the ride.
Well, you're a partner in it too, so.
Couple, three other things I wanted to bring up related to two of the items on the agenda tonight. That is, tonight there's the acceptance of the CAFR for the fiscal year end of April of 18 here. And as I started to look at it, one of the things that kind of struck me was that you know, I try to keep a close eye on how the village is performing, how other governmental entities are performing, the high school district, our district, all that type of thing. So I was going back and I was wondering why there's never any periodic financial statements for the village. It's a $15 million operation, and it's not until 6 months after the end of the fiscal year that we find out, the public finds out exactly what the heck happened financially in the village. And so I don't know if any of the board members are kept up to date, or there certainly isn't anything that I could find online that kind of relates to the kinds of things, for example, that District 26 does, which is a monthly treasurer's report, which identifies all sources of revenue, where we spend our money on a monthly basis, contrasts that against, measures that against the current budget, and allows the board members and as well as the administration to kind of gauge where we're at, how the district is performing during the course of the year. And so,
Do you want to address it?
I don't know if that is something you guys track separately. I didn't see it on the website, so I'm not quite sure. I'm a little concerned as to whether the village board is just kind of finding out 6 months after the fact exactly how the village performed financially.
We get a monthly report from our finance director.
Okay, so that's not on the website though, right? So at least my understanding it was.
We can, President Coffey, we can certainly look to see if it is on the website. If it is, we can certainly reach out to you and find the link.
The only thing I found was that when you guys do your budget machinations, you do have kind of a 10-month to date actuals compared to how you're going to roll out the next year budget
Yeah.
stuff, as opposed to that out there. So
There's nothing in those reports that's confidential, and if it's not on the website, certainly we can look at that from a staff perspective and start doing that. But we'll confirm and follow up with the board and you.
next is the levy. I'm not here to argue one way or the other. I just documents kind of struck me as a kind of the 2018 tax year 2018 assessor estimated EAD report for the village, and on there there's a couple things that huge dollar amount of growth. I would imagine it's almost all from Sage, as they finished up their project, and that factory kind of hit the tax rolls. And so that's a piece of the puzzle that you guys have to decide on, I guess, tonight, as to whether you're going to take the incremental taxes associated with new growth. But the other piece, two other things struck me on that report, and that is, as it breaks out the new construction based on residential, the residential piece was only $51,000. Literally equivalent of maybe one house of new construction in the village. And I don't think that's an anomaly. I think that's, given where we've been economically, I think it's been kind of disturbing. And that also, obviously, it has an impact on what we do over at District 26 as well in terms of planning forward for enrollment. So, so think about that piece as you think about strategic direction for the village, and combine that with the other piece that kind of struck me, and that is there's a breakout here of the residential count. And it identifies the amount of senior citizen exemptions. So basically, it's kind of a measurement of the aging of the village's population. So I kind of went back all the way to 2010, and that number represented about 11% of the total residential count was taking advantage of the senior citizen exemption. The numbers that show up on this report today, and so
it has two effects. One, obviously, I think it shows that people are staying in their homes and are aging.
Obviously, it has a direct impact on, from a commercial planning perspective, of what are we doing commercially when we have 1 out of every 6 houses in the village is over 65. And secondly, obviously I don't know if that comes into play when you guys decide tonight to decide what you're going to do with the tax levy, whether you take an increase or not, recognizing that 1 out of every 6 households is taking advantage of the senior exemption. So that's it with respect to that. The other piece, I thought I'd give an update on the TIF District Joint Review Board meeting that happened October 23rd. I think I might have been the only elected official that attended. We did have some representatives from District 155, Fire Department might have been there. There was a representative on the phone from the county, and a few other governmental agencies that sent representatives. Kind of struck on the same theme that I had brought up last month, and that is, there's 2 main projects that are left that are identified to be spent using TIF district money. One's the $110,000 for the sidewalk, which is to go from basically the power lines to connect to Burger King, and we kind of went round and round on that one. I tried to get at an answer from the administration as to what's the return on investment for the $110,000 gap in the sidewalk that we're going to
fill. And really didn't answer my question, and my response
for the last 30, 40 years, maybe
there's no why the village never spent the money on filling that gap, because they don't need to have pedestrians go from the Burger King, which is a drive-through anyway, back to the power lines. The second piece was more disturbing, just simply because it's a bigger dollar amount, is the lift station project. The board knows they had approved a $140,000 study to put in a lift station somewhere on, I guess, the Selkie property, in the theory that will spur economic development for that property. The discussion at the joint review meeting kind of went along the same lines as the discussion that I had with in front of the board about a month ago, and that is, we had the same problem of the fact that we don't have enough funds in the TIF funds in order to pay for the, not only the sidewalk project, but also the lift station project. I had asked Mr. Reif about that particular issue. There's a spreadsheet, I'm not quite sure if you folks have gotten a hold of this, but the TIF expected to, when it expires in
months or so, is expected to run a deficit of $225,000. My question was, is where was the gap? How's the gap going to fill?
where's the money going to come from to fill, what can't be filled out of the direct TIF fund? And the answer was basically that it was going to have to come from general funds. So I'm not quite sure, given I went back and reviewed the video that you folks have posted, and there really was no discussion about this kind of a problem and where the fund's going to come from and so forth. So I recommend kind of revisiting that if I were you. I think all it does is capitalize the value of the lift station into the price that Mr. Selke has got out there. He does have a $6 million price on the property. So all that village is doing is really making his property more valuable and therefore making it perhaps arguably a more expensive acquisition cost for a potential developer to come in there. Lastly, I did have the District 26 Director of Finance reach out to the county assessor's office regarding the two issues, the two properties that are within the TIF district. That's Selke property and the Jazz Channel property, as to why there's such a huge, tremendous disparity between the assessed value of these properties and the fair market value or the asking price of the property, since they're both actively on the market. I don't think we got a very good answer. In fact, we got no answer. A little disturbed on that process. This topic came up at the TIF meeting, and I indicated that from a District 26 perspective, and from a general and average taxpayer in Cary, the fact that these properties are significantly underassessed doesn't affect our taxes at all, because the TIF district, these properties are already in excess of their base TIF EAV value. So all the underassessed value is essentially resulting in the actual TIF fund getting less revenue than it otherwise would had these properties been assessed more in line with the fair market value. So while you're doing it, it's really a punishment to the village at this point that these properties seem to be underassessed. So I'm not quite sure what you guys do with that, but and given the fact that the TIF is about to expire in less than 18 months anyway, maybe irrelevant at this point in time, but to me it just screams to have this thing ended sooner rather than later, and certainly not look to extend the TIF. So with that, appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else here that just arrived or want to address the village board? All right, we'll go ahead and close open forum. I have a few things on my mayor's report. I have an update on the McHenry County Economic Development Corporation's annual dinner that Administrator Reif and I participated in a few weeks ago, and it was really a fascinating event. The feedback that we get about we live in and how progressive we are, and the jobs, and how people, once they've partnered in with a municipality or a county, they like how they're treated. What they really liked the most, and it was testified by a lot of those 4 different divisions that were given awards, various companies, and what they liked best about McHenry County was our workforce. and that we have one of the best workforces around, and that's why they like to settle in here and expand their businesses. Several of the businesses that were here have bounced back and forth between various locations within the county, and they really like to kind of stay here. They've been active. A lot of them have been pursued by, we'll say, other boundaries, and they've elected to stick with McHenry County. So it was a really a great event. A lot of interesting companies that were there, several from the village of Cary, got some awards with regards to, like Aptar got a great award, True Valley got an award, Flowcon got an award, some of these other ones that we've had before, just for their business and their business acumen and what they've done for the community as a whole with regards to the county. So I wanted to give you a brief update on that. I was asked to participate in a church forum at St. Barnabas. It was kind of a little bit of a leadership summit. Chief Finland participated with it. We had people from the school district, from Park District, who else? The Library District, just about different things that we face in our communities. This is the first ever of its kind. And it was interesting. I'll give you a couple of the questions that Pastor Sarah Wilson, who's the new pastor at St. Barnabas, who was the one that initiated this. She's trying to get the community together, and she's going to be reaching out to various other religious organizations within our village to try to work together to create a better sense of community. As she had said, we've got an incredible sense of community, but trying to make it better. Some of the questions that were asked were about what we think the community could use, our perspective, what are the 3 needs that are currently unmet in our community, where's the anxiety in the community, is there an age group that you think needs special attention? What are your organization's top 3 successful programs, initiatives? So there were questions regarding that, and it was really fascinating how they all kind of boiled down to community and various ways that we could be better at communicating with our residents. And I'd say half the people, we probably had a crowd a little bit bigger than this there, and I would say 3/4 of them didn't participate in any of our communication. Textcaster, Cary News Weekly, and they were very excited about knowing about a better job of getting some of this information out there to them. We also talked about social media and the positive and negative effects it has on communities. We talked about various situations and how to get the message out in the most timely, accurate, factual way possible. So, we're going to work together on these things moving forward. She wants to continue the dialogue with regards to this, and I thought it was a great forum. It was a
group of people, and in terms of we talked a lot about, or I talked a lot about what we do to offer communication to our residents via the website, Cary News Weekly, Textcaster, and I don't know if everybody has been in the Village Hall during the day, but we have just added a monitor right next to where Maria sits. It's kind of hung up there. It's going to be community events, and it will be a kind of a rolling thing to when people are in Village Hall, so they'll be able to get caught up on things. We can, advertise whatever we want on there, but you got a captive audience right here in our lobby. So we've been working on that for a while. So village staff got that implemented in the last few weeks. So, again, we're always trying to be transparent and make sure everybody has all the information that they need and know where to get it. So it was a really an interesting forum. So I was actually glad to be asked to participate in that. All right, one other thing I have tonight is I have a proclamation, World Pancreatic Cancer Day. Whereas in 2018, an estimated 55,400 people were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 44,330 will die from the disease. Whereas pancreatic is currently is cancer deaths in the United States, and is by 2020, whereas pancreatic cancer is the only major cancer with in the single digits at just 9%. Whereas the good health and well-being of the residents of Cary are enhanced as a direct result of increased awareness about the symptoms and risks of pancreatic cancer and research into early detection, causes, and effective treatments. Now, therefore, I, Mark Hownick, Mayor of the Village of Cary, do hereby proclaim
on November 15th, 2018, to be World Pancreatic Cancer Day in the Village of Cary, dated this 6th day of November 2018. Very dear to me. Shannon and I have a very dear friend of ours who is in his 5th year of pancreatic cancer, and it's been a very a rough road, and it's coming to an end. So, for Mark Jonas, thank you. We had Trustee Betts had asked to give an update on McHenry County Council governance. Chris?
Yes. We had a speaker from the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and he spoke about emergencies. Not only do they plan for emergencies that are happening in the McHenry County, but after the effect. And he spoke about what they do and what they plan on doing for after an emergency. An example would be a tornado. We have a tornado in Cary, and the blood first aid comes to Cary. Well, what are they going to do with all these first aid people? So they are planning for helping out the first aid people after the fact. So that was just very interesting. Not only do they just do the emergency itself, but planning for after the emergency, what's going to happen too. So.
Thank you. Moving along to the consent agenda, I will under.
I wanted to
Oh, I'm
just add-
sorry, I
That's
did-
okay, I just wanted to add one thing. Just wanted to say, I attended a law enforcement women's conference that the police department, Cary, had put on. It was at the end of October, and it was phenomenal. And I want to just say a big thank you to Officer Saveda for putting it all together. I thought it was really well done and really well executed, and so very nicely done.
Good.
Good to hear, thanks. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items number 1 through 7 as shown on the village's website and displayed on the video monitor during the village board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Kraus,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Cavilli,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Koffler,
Yes.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the recent and acceptance of the comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as CAFR, for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2018, and the auditor's required communication letter.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Michael?
This evening, we have Vice President Ed Tracy himself back here to present the report on the village's 4/30, 2018 GAFA. Ed?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Jacob, Michael, and the rest of the staff for all the assistance they provided us during the audit. We were out here for a couple weeks in August, did our field work, and received cooperation from everyone on staff, so we certainly appreciate that. The CAFR, as presented here, will be submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement and Excellence in Financial Reporting Program, and we fully expect that it will receive that certificate this year, which would make it 20 years in a row for the village to receive that honor. By participating in that program, the report that the CAFR has presented has additional information other than what's in a regular annual financial report, particularly statistical information in the back, a lot of 10-year history on revenue trends, debt trends, and just overall financial results, and some other economic and operating information, which is really useful information, good information that kind of demonstrates how Cary's grown over the years. Financial statements do contain, there's really 2 sets of financial statements within your CAFR, the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial. Government-wide financial statements looks at things for more of a long-term assets, long-term liabilities, and balance sheets, whereas the fund financial statements has a more current focus. What's called a modified accrual basis. So essentially, long-term assets, when they're purchased, they're expensed in the fund financial statements. They're put on the balance sheet, depreciated on the government line statement. and that is treated differently, balance sheet versus income statement. Overall, just as an overall summary, the governmental activity,
Water, sewer, and parking under the full accrual basis, government-wide statements have a positive bottom line.
and the
Sewer fund and the parking fund.
loss is about 87,000. Keeping in mind that within that 87,000, there's depreciation expense of a little over $1 million. So that's a significant part of the bottom line for the water and sewer fund. Within the fund financial statements, the general fund, obviously the most significant fund for the village, had a loss this year of about $370,000, which is a reduction of 5% of fund balance. Fund balance sits at about 70% of your annual expenses at the end of the year, which is a good spot to be in. It's sufficient, but I would not consider it excessive. Overall,
We're about 3.8% under budget, and expenses were under budget by about 5%.
the other item I just wanted to IMRF, 2 years ago we started recognizing
Liability for IMRF for the pension plan. IMRF's net pension liability was reduced from 2.6 million to just under 800,000 this year, and the plan is 95% funded. So it's a very strong plan, and the decrease in the net pension liability is due primarily to the investment performance at IMRF exceeded actuarial expectations over the last few years. The police pension plan, the net pension liability remained about the same, decreased slightly from about 8.5 to about 8.9 million. And that plan is actually about 56% funded, which is up a little bit, pick up from last year. And lastly, this year the village adopted a new governmental accounting standard, statement number 74, which relates to the other post-employment benefits plan. This is retiree or health care offered to retirees. Retirees pay their own premium, but they're paying the same premium as active employees, so there's what's called an implicit grade subsidy within the plan. And so there's a liability associated with that. And that was booked for the first time this year. And it's similar to what the methodology and all is similar to what was done with pensions the last couple of years ago, now being applied to these OPEB plans. So that's a new liability that was booked in the government-wide financial statements, and that was picked up this year. It was about 500,000 overall. But so that's one change, one new standard that was adopted in the current year. Otherwise, there weren't any significant changes in terms of accounting treatments for any items or new disclosures or things along those lines.
Questions?
I just have a question, just one question, because you brought up the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, and this is something I've touched on in the past. There's another award program that they offer, and I'm trying to remember, is it on budget presentation? Yeah, and I'm looking for outside input on your opinion of what is more valuable to this village, as far as the residents are concerned, because the way I understand the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting is we just give them the numbers, and it's not really an audit or anything. It's just that we meet the way they want our numbers presented. So I'm not really sure I understand the significance of it. The budget presentation and having a readable budget that the people can look at and dissect is something that would be important to me as a resident. So I don't know, what's your opinion on if that's money well spent or not?
Well, as far as the CAFR itself, it's not just necessarily handing it over to them, because it is reviewed by about 3 to 5 reviewers from around the country. I actually review other reports, so I know. And, it does need to meet those standards. It also provides recommendations with each review as to potential improvements, gives some best practices on upcoming standards and like. So there is value there. It's not just turning over. But the budget presentation certainly, I think that is a very beneficial thing in terms of it
goes to the planning process, goes to, making sure that, the budget obviously is such an important document, lays out the plans for the village and all. So I mean, again, make me pick one which is more important, and maybe I would say the budget, but I also don't think that the cap itself, if you're looking in terms of cost benefit, there's really not, the cost is not that much additional, it's minimal, I think, at least based on the way I costed it. So I think the benefits you get from that cap are,
Yeah.
But I think that the budget, the distinguished budget award certainly has a benefit as well.
We're, Trustee Coster, we're to that point, we're talking internally here, just from a staff perspective, about the Distinguished Budget Award, and it would be a multi-year process for us here, and we need to figure out how we'd be able to accommodate that with the staff that we have right now. There would be a lot more work that would have to occur, not only during the budget process, but through the whole year from a staff perspective. So I understand your comment, and we always want to continue to improve the budget, make sure it's an easier document for our residents to read, and want them to get value out of it as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just hope that we can look forward to a future where maybe we get that award. So that's something we can put in future plans.
I understand.
Sure.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
McAlpine?
Yes.
Cavelli?
Yes.
Betts?
Yes.
Weinhammer?
Yes.
Costler?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve an ordinance granting certain text amendments to the Village of Cary zoning ordinance to add an associate member to the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals.
So moved.
Second.
Mayor, Village Board, we had discussed this at our previous Village Board meeting. What staff was proposing here, and we talked with our zoning board, was to add an associate member to our ZPA. This was reviewed by the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, was recommended unanimously for approval by the Village Board. As I mentioned, we discussed this at our last meeting. There was some conversation here about the role of that individual, and I believe the board was looking for some alternative language. We have on page 2 of the staff report, we've got the ZPA recommended language, and we've also got the revised language just based on village board feedback for you also to consider. That revised language that we discussed previously here would only allow that individual to vote where there wasn't a quorum, that associate member. What staff is recommending, we put some new information here from our last discussion. We are recommending the language that was recommended by the zoning board. Here we've included some information on page 1, which illustrates the amount of time in which we have members absent at zoning board meetings. And you can see there by the table that's on the bottom of your packet, which indicates that approximately more or less at least half the time for the last 4 years or so, we've had someone absent at the meeting. We think it would be beneficial here for this individual to play a little bit more of an active role, not just attend the meetings to vote, but be able to vote when someone is absent at the meeting. So more than happy to answer questions. Want to make sure that you're aware of the options here, there in front of you. And like I said, happy to answer any questions you have.
So which one are we voting on? Are you voting on the recommended language or the revised language? Because when I read the resolution, it looks like we're voting on the recommended language.
We have right now within the ordinance,
The associate member shall be a deliberative member in all instances, and a voting member when one or more regular members is absent.
yeah, right now how the language is set up is it was what was recommended from the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals.
Okay, I would be more in favor of what we originally discussed, the revised language, that they would vote if a quorum was needed.
But even if revised, it still says voting in all instances.
Yeah, no,
Both of them say that.
I would only be okay with this if they're only voting to complete the quorum.
Let me throw something out here. I had Chairman Corey had called me about this. He had watched the meeting before this, and he was of the mindset that wanting us to move forward with best practices. And there's a lot of other communities, and he's talked to other ZPA chairmen that they have an associate member that fills in when there's one or two absences, whatever it is, they come in. It's the main thing is, how are you going to get people to come and be part of an associate program if they're not going to be able to participate on a meeting? And, sure, they can participate, but their vote doesn't really count if there's not an absence. For them to just come and sit at a meeting and not be able to render a vote, because if you look at the past meetings, several times that there's, and we have several months where there's 2 or 3 people that are absent consistently.
I think that's a good point, but then I would also point to like Martha and Barbara, our regulars who are here that don't vote, but they come to all of the meetings. I think it's a great opportunity to give somebody experience and to understand what's going on through the ZPA process, to step in to fill if that is needed, but.
Well, and just, I understand what you're saying, and Mr. Kostler had said at the last meeting too, he thought it was more of like a power play, and I couldn't disagree more. This builds strength within our organization. For a power play to happen, it has to happen at the village board member, because they don't act in any way, shape, or form. It's a recommendation. So the village board has the power to make the necessary changes as they see fit, as each individual board member does. When we notified the candidates that we were not going through with the interviews, and one of the candidates had said, why not? And we said we hadn't come to terms on these things. And this one particular candidate said that if it wasn't going to be an integral part of being an associate, he was no longer interested in that role anyway. So I'm looking at it from, it's very difficult to get people to step up. You want to give them an opportunity to have a role in our community so that they learn the best practices, they learn from the experience of the current board, and giving them the opportunity at that same time. So that's, that's just where I'm coming from. I think it's in the best interest of the village to move forward in a positive way, that we give our advisory boards the members that they need to get things done. I know we've only had one time where we weren't able to have a quorum and have a meeting, and where we had a paid consultant there, we had several residents there. We don't ever want to have to be put in that situation
I
again.
agree.
We're a much more professional organization than that. And at times, there are multiple absences. Things happen, life happens, work, people travel, I get it. People are sick, so why not give them an opportunity? So that's my song and dance on that. So I recommend that we stick with the original zoning board. They're the ones that crafted this. They're the ones that would be dealing with this as it is. So my recommendation would be as it's been presented by the ZPA.
I would disagree, though. The way the zoning and planning board votes does determine how we vote on this board.
How is that?
Well, if they make a negative recommendation, then we need on something, then needs to be like a supermajority on certain issues in terms of voting.
Well, also, at the same thing, they can make a unanimous decision, and it goes to our consent agenda. Well, at any given time, a board member can have that removed and have a discussion on that and have a separate vote on that. So it kind of works both ways, Trustee Krause. I'm just trying to give the benefit to an advisory panel that is critical to our village. And we are having some issues with attendance, and I want to make sure that we're always putting ourselves in the best light with any developer or any resident or anybody that comes to discuss things at the village board or at the zoning board, so that they're represented properly.
I was a little disappointed because both the recommended language and the revised language does state, as Trustee Cavelli was stating, that the regular members shall be voting in all instances for both of those. But when we discussed this at the committee of the whole, that wasn't how majority of us felt. So I was kind of hoping when I saw this on here that it was going to go back to how Trustee Cavelli had requested, and I felt that most of us, and maybe I'm incorrect, had agreed that we didn't want them voting on every instance.
I just to clarify that, the language in the revised language, it says the regular members shall be, so, and then continues in all instances. And then it further states the associate member.
And it says,
It's
again,
just
but
for
it's,
purposes of completing
right,
the
but the
quorum.
associate member shall be deliberative member in all instances and a voting member when needed for the purpose of completing a quorum.
And I believe that was what was requested by the village board. They would have the ability to conversate and ask questions of the petitioner, but when it comes down to voting, just when the quorum is needed.
And then
So
at
I
the bottom, it
think
says
this-
staff recommends that the proposed text amendment be denied, which is the revised language. Is that correct?
The revised language is what I believe the village board had asked at the previous meeting.
Staff is saying that if we decide to go with the revised language, that they would rather us just
We-
not vote for it.
We
or
we
strike
are
down.
we are recommending here that the zoning board recommendation that's brought before you, that's what we're recommending you approve. If you don't want to proceed with that, we recommend denial of this. Certainly, I want to lay out all the options for the village board to consider. One of the options is to accept that revised language. There's been many other times when the village board has had a different opinion than what staff has, and that's fine. We're laying out our recommendation to you. One of the options is that revised language.
Also, just for the record, the only reason we're even having this conversation when it was kind of tanked the last time is because the village board has to take action on a recommendation from the zoning board. So we couldn't just let this go away. They made a recommendation, so the village board has to act on that recommendation.
I'll just state again that my thoughts on it were that this came as a recommendation from the ZPA, and it was a unanimous recommendation that all of their members felt that way. I think there was some concern, and please feel free to jump in and correct me if my understanding is incorrect, but I think some of the concerns was that people thought that this person could have a lot of power and that one member may sway how the vote is going to come in from the ZPA, the recommendations rather, not the vote, the recommendations. And I think that that was kind of rebuked in the sense that we had asked, is it the same member that is missing? And because it's not the same member and it's different people that are missing from time to time, then you're not going to know who you're replacing, who you're substituting for, in other words. I did check with some of our local other communities that are doing some of this. It's kind of a forward approach of thinking of best practices and saying, how do you look at things from the future? How do you train someone? I think that if we're going to ask someone to step into this position, to say that in a 2-year time period, really, you're not going to vote it maybe once, maybe not at all. I think I personally think either we go and vote on how the ZPA recommended, or we just vote no. I think it's silly to set up an ordinance that says we're going to do it this otherwise, this revised way. I just think we should say, no, we don't want to do it. I don't know why to make the change, is my point.
I disagree. I think the reason why I even proposed it at the committee of the whole was because I could tell the board was divided on this issue. And I was trying to bridge a way that this board can actually get together and maybe agree on something of this nature. And so in this sense, you have what staff is looking for, which is to hopefully have somebody there and they can get the experience. And if needed, like you said, if you have people there, they're not having to come back. If you have paid consultants there, their time is not being wasted, the money isn't being wasted. So in a sense, to me, that was a win-win. And I think as a board, that's what we should be trying to do a lot of times is, okay, if half the board doesn't like this, what might we do where we can accomplish all the goals we're setting out to do? So I would not be dismissive of the revised language, but if majority of the board does not feel that the recommended language is appropriate, then I'm not going to support that either.
I just want to correct the record that I never said it was a power play. What I said is this member could potentially be the most powerful member of the board if they vote. That's what I said. I guess I have a question.
Look, can I ask you to elaborate more on that statement? I guess I'm kind of confused how one person could be, I'm being honest here. I want to know what you're thinking.
Depending on who is, let's say somebody is against a project, but then they're going to be absent, then this person is going to vote in their place and they're for the project. And they could be the swing vote. They could be the deciding vote, which makes them the most powerful person on that whole board. That's my view of it. And Sure, I would like somebody to gain experience and watch the board and learn all the rules that are associated with the zoning board, which there's a lot of rules, and it takes a while to learn. But one thing I have a question about is I made the suggestion that maybe the chairman should schedule the meetings based on when people are available, instead of just saying this is, we're having it this night every month. So if he says, hey, we're going to have it at this time on this month, and 3 out of the 7 say, I can't be there, or 4 out of the 7, then reschedule it a day earlier, a day later, reschedule it.
With this, I understand the comment, and the challenge with the zoning board is the public notice that has to be made. And that kind of dictates of when the meeting actually has to occur, and that public notice has to be made between 15 and 30 days prior to the meeting.
Right.
So,
But that still gives you some wiggle room, a couple days either way.
but
I get
the
what you're
notice
saying.
is on that day. It states the meeting is on this day, this time, this location. And so there's certainly, the zoning board right now, the chairman's talking about options here. I think Director Simmons at the last meeting mentioned that they had some conversation about, moving it to once a month, trying to accommodate people better. And so we are looking at other ways to do business here.
Well, and we also, every year, we have to publish when all of our meetings are. We have to give a year in advance when all of our public meetings are taking place. And, just to plug and play to fit somebody's schedule, that's not going to be conducive to future people or businesses that want to come do business. They're going to look at their calendars, they're going to have to look at their notice. I totally think that maybe if we're having this much trouble getting this thing down, then we just vote not to do this. And let's see if the zoning board and our staff can come up with a realization to having it just one day a month. And hopefully people could schedule their lives around that if at all possible. Now, this was just a recommendation brought forth. It's not meant to,
Angst with anybody, with just a best practices moving forward.
our advisory boards, trying to give them a little bit more depth on the bench, and for, future appointments that could come into play. If they've got the experience, they could step right in. And they've already been vetted. I appointed 2 different trustees to go through the interviewing process, so that would have been negated because they would have had the selection of the final 2, and then Chairman Corey and I would have made the final. So we were being very upfront and open about the individuals that were going to be considered. But, I think this, by not having them participate unless there is a quorum, it diminishes the role that we're trying to, have best practices for this advisory board.
So we're not willing to try it, it's all or nothing.
Well, I don't understand why because we'll have very difficult time finding somebody to come in that's just only going to be able to, that will only be able to participate in things when there is a need for a quorum. And in this past year, we've only had that happen once, thank goodness. Because we don't want to operate like that. We want to operate with, all cylinders running at all times. But, I understand where everybody's going. It's, if the board wants to do this and you have a majority of the way you want to do it, then that's fine. I could live with that. I would just like to see this, board move something positive for the rest of the village, so we can get
I
something
agree,
done.
which is why I'd like us to compromise.
Well, and I think everyone is looking at it. I'm just looking at, the ZPA is the one that came to us for this. This isn't us as a board coming to them saying that we see a need. It was the ZPA coming to us. And therefore, I'm thinking if we don't want to do what they want, then decline it and say, go back to the drawing board and see if they can come up with something else. And that to me is the compromise. The compromise should come from them to come to us. If what they bring to us we're not comfortable with, then we say no and we move on. And let them come up with a compromise that might work better for what they feel. I think their input is important on that too.
Have we asked them?
I have not. And when I talked to Chairman Corey before, he was insistent on that we go with the way that they had presented it. Because he had talked to the board before that. He was not at that meeting. They were made aware of what he had felt about it, that he thought that was the best practices for the ZPA. We could absolutely send it back down and say, would you consider come up with another plan that would benefit them, that we can all agree on? I have that be a good compromise?
I think it'd be worth it to see what
Okay.
the other members think.
Everybody agree to send us back down to the ZPA and
I don't
see
think
what they
there's
can
any
come
rush
up
on
with?
this.
I'd like to call the vote.
I'm just wondering if sending it back down, what's the outcome here of changing this? I mean, there's three scenarios of nothing or the revised language for the village board or the recommended language. If we're not interested in this, I think we vote it down and we just tell our zoning board to continue to work with village staff on this to come up with other options here, whether it's have meetings once a month, look at some of the suggestions trustee Kostler's come up with here to see if we can make something work.
Well, if we can go for a motion, we have a motion and a second on the table, I can go for the roll call if that's what, see how this.
So what are we
I
voting on?
second.
We're voting on the
Call
original,
question.
pardon me?
Like Jeff said, I'm seconding Jeff's motion to call the question. Take a vote.
Which question or which?
We're taking a vote on the first, right, on how it is?
How it's recommended is the ZPA language.
Okay,
How it's recommended or the revised?
How it's recommended by the ZPA,
So the first time.
yes,
Right, the first bullet point.
the first one.
okay.
Roll call, Courtney, please.
Kostler,
No.
McAlpine,
Yes,
Cavelli,
No.
Betts,
Yes.
Kraus,
No.
Weinhammer,
No.
Okay, motion fails. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the village administrator to execute a settlement agreement between the Village of Cary and PI Telecom.
so moved.
Second.
We had talked about this at length before, so I'm just going to go into roll call, please.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Kostler,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes,
And relating to that, I will entertain a motion to rescind the village board's February 6, 2018 decision denying an ordinance granting a conditional use for the telecommunications antenna for the property located at 30 Northwest Highway.
so moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
Kostler,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes,
Weinhammer,
Yes.
And continued related to that is I will entertain a motion to rescind the village board's February 6, 2018 decision related to the approval of an ordinance granting a conditional use for the telecommunications antenna for the property located at 30 Northwest Highway.
So moved.
second.
Roll call, please, Courtney.
Kraus,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes,
Cavelli,
Yes.
Kostler,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
And finally, I will entertain a motion to approve an ordinance granting a conditional use for the telecommunications antenna for the property located at 30 Northwest Highway.
so moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Betts,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes,
Kraus,
Yes.
Kostler,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Thank you. And on number 7, I would like to table this for the time being. Trustee Kostler, right before the meeting, had given us some new language that would relate to this particular time. I'd like some time to review this and give the rest of the board some time to review this. There's nothing eminent regarding this. I'd like to make sure that we get it right, that we're going to proceed, that will set us up for success moving forward. So I am going to table that till the next meeting or two.
Should be a motion to table, right?
Motion to table? Yeah, I will entertain a motion to a table item number 7 on items for separate action.
so moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
McAlpine,
Yes,
Cavelli,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Kostler,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
And just for a matter of public record, we are continuing the ongoing Lafarge-Meyer material transfer of their deed until November 20th, 2018. Thank you. Jacob Reif, anything on your report?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. Chief Finland? Nothing? Director Morimoto? Michael? Thank you. Any future agenda items and discussion by the village board?
You were talking about earlier, social media, and I would like to talk to the village board about social media with the police department.
including the police department.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We will reboot in just a minute.